Hi everyone, my name's Dahlia. Welcome to my channel. Today I'm going to be doing my July wrap-up and my Booktubeathon wrap-up since I only did one video update during the entire Booktubeathon. I just didn't have time really to do any updates, so right now I'm just going to talk about the experience as a whole, and so that is what to expect for this video. So I'm not going to start with the Booktubeathon wrap-up. I'm going to start with my July wrap-up because technically they tied together since Booktubeathon was at the end of July. And so the first book that I read in July was Lady Midnight, and that was a reread for me. And if you don't know, Lady Midnight is by Cassandra Clare, and it's part of her kind of Shadowhunters saga. I don't really know what people are calling everything as a whole. But Lord of Shadows just came out a couple months ago, and I've been dying to read the second book ever since I read the first book last year. So before I read the second book, I reread the first one, and it was amazing as always. And so with that said, I moved on to Lord of Shadows, and oh my god, it blew me away. And what I loved about Lord of Shadows was how Cassandra Clare really tied in real world prejudices but translated it into a Shadowhunters context, and it was amazing how she addressed all these real issues in her urban fantasy story, and it was amazing. And all the characters and the relationships were just so complicated but really handled well, and everything was just so intense, and I was on the edge of my seat every single page basically. And then the ending absolutely killed me, and of course we have to wait 2 more years for the third book to come out, and I don't know how I'm going to survive that entire wait, but I'll be okay, I think, if I distract myself with other books meanwhile. So obviously I rated Lord of Shadows 5 stars. I mean, it's kind of a given. Cassandra Clare is amazing. Yeah, Julian is my baby. I just want to take care of him because poor kid, he's going through a lot. And yeah, then the second book, well, this is technically the third book that I finished in July, and that is A Clash of Kings by George R.R. Martin. This is book 2 of the Song of Ice and Fire series. Basically, the first book is Game of Thrones, and so obviously I can't really explain what happens in this book because you have to know what happens in the first book, and it's super hard to break down what the first book is about in a couple sentences just because it's so complicated. Basically, it's a historical medieval epic adult fantasy with political intrigue and family drama between houses, and I'm not giving it justice with my description, but it's so good, and there's so many characters that, and you would think it's hard to keep up with, but honestly it's not. You just get sucked right into the story. That's what happened to me, and it's just amazing. So I gave this a 5 stars because it was so good from beginning to end, especially towards the end. Literally every single chapter something crazy happened, and the way George R.R. Martin writes his books is that he writes one chapter at a time, and he switches the protagonist from each chapter. So one chapter will be Arya, and then something crazy happens in her chapter, then the next chapter will be Jon Snow, and I'm like, wait, what? And then the next chapter will be Tyrion Lannister, and all of it keeps switching to every chapter, and I feel every chapter ended on a cliffhanger, and so you have to just keep reading till you get to the end, and oh my god, it was so good. Then that's it for the main books I read outside of Booktubeathon, and then Booktubeathon started, and I made a TBR of 7 books, and I only read 3 out of those 7 books, but I think that's pretty good considering that I was super busy this week. It was the worst week to have Booktubeathon. I was working 8 hours a day, plus when I got home taking my siblings to camp or practice after that, soccer practice, and then like coming home, and like on one of those days it was also my mom's birthday, and then another one of those days I had dinner with my family after. So I was busy during the entire daytime and then also into the evening, and so I barely had time to read. But I finished 3 books in 1 week, which I haven't done like in a while, and so I think I did pretty good. And so the challenges I knocked out were read a book in 1 day, read a book with the main character who's very different from you, and the third, I think, what was it? Oh, read a book you bought based off the cover. Even though I chose it from the library, I kind of counted it. So the book I read in 1 day was Queer: A Graphic History, and this was really great. It basically was like an introduction to queer theory and like the importance, like theorists in this like realm of study, and it was just really great. It didn't go into like a lot of detail about like the other labels in the LGBTQ plus community, but it mostly just talked about like just theories that people have like come up with and like had discourses about throughout the years, basically, and the history of this word and what it means now to different people, and it was really good. And so I gave it a let's see, what did I give it? Oh, I gave it a 4.2 stars. I feel like I wanted it to be more inclusive of like other labels, because sometimes queer is used as like an umbrella term, but I mean, other than that, it was like pretty good. It was pretty solid. So if you're interested in this, then I recommend it. Then the second book that I read for Booktubeathon was Strange the Dreamer by Laini Taylor. It looks like that. And Strange the Dreamer I read for the cover challenge on Booktubeathon. And let me tell you, this book was so good. I've read her other trilogy, Daughter, Smoke, and Bone, and I love that trilogy so much. So when this book came out, I really wanted to read it because a lot of people were saying that it was really good, and so it gave me high hopes, and I went into it not knowing much about it, just that it was about a guy named Laszlo Strange, and he studied this forgotten city, and then one day, like, he gets the chance to go visit that city. Other than that, like, I didn't know much about it, and it was just so good. Like, it surprised me just, like, how creative Laini Taylor is, even though I should have known by, like, since I've read her other books, but she's just so creative with her world building and her characters. Like, there are non-human characters in this book who are just so fascinating, and, like, they have, like, blue skin, and they have these powers, and I'm just like, what? Like, these powers are so creative, but I don't want to give away what they are because I want you to be like, you know, I want you to I want you to experience that too, but like, it's just so cool. And Laszlo Strange was such a pure cinnamon roll in a world that sees him as weird and different, and basically they cast him as a nobody, and like, oh my god, it was such a good book. And I'm definitely going to do a review on that, so I'm going to just stop talking about it because I'm going to want to talk more about it in my review. Then the last book I read in July, and the last book I read for the Booktubeathon, was When Dimple Met Rishi, or I think it's Rishi. I really don't know how to pronounce it, but I want to be able to pronounce it right. And I don't think it explained how to pronounce it. It just said that it's not pronounced Rishi, so I don't know if it's Rishi. But this is by Sandhya Menon. I hope I didn't butcher that too, but basically this is a YA contemporary, and it's been a while since I've read a contemporary, but it was really good. Like, I flew through like the first, like, I don't know, 250 pages, and then like maybe the last 50 I kind of let it drag on for like a couple days because I was kind of like over it, because I don't know, contemporaries, I just have like a very short like attention span for contemporary, so if I didn't finish this in 2 days, then it took me longer to finish. Like, I dragged it out when I didn't need to. Yeah, so this follows an Indian American girl named Dimple, and she is trying to like break out of her parents' like expectations of her. They have these very like strict Indian like customs and expectations and things that they're trying to like implement on her, because there's like they're very old-fashioned basically. And so it is a story that is very ingrained in culture, but also trying to like kind of like break out of it. I mean, it's kind of like trying to find a balance between culture and individuality, and I know I definitely struggle with that sometimes in my own culture and my own household. Like I feel like, you know, like this is a story I can relate to on some levels, but also not other levels, because she's Indian. And so it was really fascinating to like read about her experiences, and her parents are trying to set her up with like the ideal Indian husband. And little does she know that they set her up with this guy named Rishi, and they both end up going to a like kind of like a camp in San Francisco. And she thinks she's going because her parents are finally understanding that she's interested in technology, but her parents are actually setting her up with someone, and basically it's about them exploring like their relationship with each other, like, you know, figuring like out like what's gonna happen, and her trying to be like, well, I'm super mad at my parents, but like I want to do my own thing. So it was just a good book, and I definitely recommend it. It was funny and really fast-paced. Yeah, I don't know, it was good. So those are the books that I read in July, and those last 3 I read for the Booktubeathon. I hope you all also had a really good reading month, because total I read 6 books. 6 books in July, just not bad. So yeah, pretty happy with that. And yeah, thank you for watching, and I hope you all have a very good day. Bye.